Hello. Hey, hello and welcome to another late night edition of Blind Eye Live. I am your host, Blind Eye himself, Hunter King, owner and proprietor of Blind Eye Media, and we are on day 4 of week 1 of my NFL draft team by team preview series. We're on the NFC North, and I'm going to roll right into that after a pretty quick intro here, because the last couple shows have been pretty long. Y'all deserve a little bit of a quicker show. So we're going to hop right into that here in a second. I want to say that tomorrow I will be streaming tomorrow, and there's going to be minimal football. Gonna do an NBA themed show. I wanted to start doing that sooner, but there's been a bunch of NFL offseason news, and considering been trying to keep the show shorter, and it seemed like for a while there was news like every single day. I barely talked about NBA, but that's something I want to do because eventually we're going to get past the draft. 2 weeks from today, round 1 will be going on. We'll be towards the end of it, hopefully. I'll probably be jumping on live as soon as I get home from the Beast Feast, which is an event here in Beaumont, Texas, at Ford Park, I want to say 7 p.m., but technically it'll be getting kicked off, I think, before that. But Thursday, April 28th, in the evening, you can find tickets. If you type it in on Google, it'll Beast Feast 2022, Beaumont, Texas. You'll be able to find it, or Ford Park, you'll be able to find it. And tickets are available still. So it's a great time, fun day. Last year ended kind of crazy because we were outdoors last year. We'll be indoors this year. Last year, it was nice, and then all of a sudden, just a crazy rain/wind storm came, and it came a flood. And we were under a pavilion, but the wind was blowing, so the rain was coming in sideways. It was nuts. Like, I was near the middle of the big, widest part of the pavilion. Didn't matter. I was drenched. Still great. Who cares? But it was a fun time. That happened at the very end of the event. So, but just to be known, if you miss a Beast Feast, you're missing memories. But anyway, so I won't be able to stream the first round like I wanted to, but I will jump on I'm planning on jumping on as soon as I get home. So the draft might still be rolling, or the first round might still be rolling. I will be streaming during rounds 2 and 3 of the draft that Friday. But once we're past draft weekend, once we get into May, it'll be mostly basketball content. I'll cover like other news like I did last summer. I might dig into following a little more baseball. Of course, big story from, what was it, last night? Was Clayton Kershaw's pitching a perfect game through 7 innings. Gets pulled. And I've heard all the talk of, health, safety, he coming off injuries. He dealt with arm issues during, this crazy spring period because of lockout, shortened run up to the season, what have you. And he's handled it well, and I mean, he may be totally fine with it. I'm not 100% convinced of that. I can see him understanding the logic behind it, but he's already got a ring. This team, a lot of the players on it, coaches, they've got a ring now. I get that the team goal is a championship. But I mean, he's dealt with injury issues. Like, I've been hearing people say, I'm like, he may never get this opportunity again. There have only been 23 perfect games in Major League Baseball history. There have been over 100 championship teams in Major League Baseball history. There have been Hall of Famers that have gone their entire careers without a championship. He's got one. You know, I'd want that opportunity at history. I'd want my teammates to have that opportunity at history. So, but to me, this is what happens when math and championship or bust mentality has done to sports, or does to a sport. So one of the great things about basketball is, even with the mathematics of basketball, there's still a skill level involved to be able to pull off the math. And there's different ways people pull, are efficient, whatever. It's one of the things, like I see a bunch of stuff with football with a lot of the advanced stats tracking. I think a bunch of it's overblown and overrated because I don't think it's very accurate. Devin, here's how big a discrepancy there can be between the numbers and the perceptions of people who've been around football in their entire lives and watch it and know what someone's trying or what someone's role is and how awesome they are at doing it. Devin White was an All-Pro in 2020. His Pro Football Focus grade was like a 50 or something like that for the season, which is not good. If your grading system has a all-pro that everyone, like anyone who watches the game, consensus, like this guy's minimum Pro Bowler, very much one of the best players in the league, your grade system is bad. It's broken and flawed. So why would I care what it has to say? Someone was coming at me over my take on Trayvon Walker. Well, the PFF tracking says this, or the PFF data says this. I said, PFF's data is crap. In a lot of cases, there's a lot of things they do really well. But for the most part, I feel like PFF's numbers are kind of jank. Really, the only numbers that are of any worth, for the most part, are offensive related, particularly quarterbacks and receivers. And I'll get off the soapbox real quick, but don't come at me with PFF data. I don't respect it over my eyes, in the eyes of other people. I don't. Advanced stats are great when they are able to put, a box score into context. There's a lot of things like advanced stats in basketball are able to do that football just can't. In baseball's just become numbers. It's literally a numbers game. It's so mechanical at this point. And kind of the thing with Kershaw, I hear this, I hear the argument and I get it. But there's also an argument, people talking about, I'm like, so, all it's about is being a cog, like literally all it's about is just being an efficient cog in the machine. There's no heart in that. There's no soul to that. I was watching Kershaw pitch that perfect game. I turned it off when he got pulled. Like, I was following that game until they pulled him, and I was done. So I don't know what to I don't know what to tell people, because this is the other thing. Sports is entertainment. Yes, the goal for teams win a championship, whatever. But really, the goal is to make money. The goal is to entertain people. The goal is to get people to buy jerseys. The goal is to have fans invested. And yes, the championship team invests people. Yada 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 yada. But great players are really what drives massive fan engagement. What Michael Jordan did for basketball what Magic Johnson and Larry Bird's rivalry did for basketball, what Steph Curry and the Warriors have done, regardless, what LeBron James has brought for basketball, Kevin Durant, and this era of stars that we're in right now, and the style of play of the NBA right now. And with football. And it's a massive team sport because you've got 50-man team or 50-plus man rosters. Having an elite quarterback energizes your fan base. People tune in to watch a matchup that has two elite quarterbacks. I mean, that Bills-Chiefs game, the Chiefs-Bengals game, this year's Super Bowl was awesome. People tune in for Tom Brady. I'm sorry, in recent years, I don't know, baseball just doesn't have that. Baseball has a bunch of uptight stuff, unwritten rules that are stupid. Oh, heaven forbid someone's cracked a smile when they hit a home run. We got to throw a 102-mile-per-hour fastball at their head and try and kill them because heaven forbid someone had a little fun. And, I know there's a lot of... But here's my thing. I grew up playing baseball. There's some things I get it that you shouldn't do. But, I don't know, have some fun. Just like in other sports, you don't want a guy celebrating? How about you don't hang a terrible pitch over home plate for some dude to smash over the fence? How about you don't do that? You know what? Or, heck, how about this? If you're so terrified that Jose Bautista is going to flip a bat when he makes a home run, Texas Rangers, how about you just intentionally walk him? If you're that scared of that, if that's going to make you mad and cry. It drives me nuts. Now, here's my thing. Don't get me wrong about this. A team, a pitcher can't control his pitches and he starts hitting batters I'm trying to remember what game it was in the last week where that happened. And the bench is cleared. I mean, at some point, I'm okay with that. If you want to throw hands, if you're so mad about someone flipping their bat and you want to run over there and get into a fight, that's fine. You can dodge fists, fight's a fight, whatever. If you want to have that in the game, that's fine. I'm not okay with people throwing 100-mile-per-hour fastballs at people. We've seen the damage that can do to someone. That's not cool. And if I believed someone did that on purpose to me, I'd file charges. I mean, we saw what happened to Giancarlo Stanton years ago. Pitchers, obviously he's trying to hit him in the ribs. Here's my thing. 100-mile-per-hour fastball, the ribs could break a rib. And I remember getting beamed playing baseball. I remember that. It was not fun and it usually wasn't because of something I did. The best player in our little league was on my team. It was my cousin. And we had several really good players. And I a lot of times would get thrown at the inning after something had happened because I batted lower in the batting order because I had every tool except a good bat. I was okay. I was pretty decent at getting on base, but I wasn't a good power hitter. But I could bat switch and I could put the ball in play. I was great defensively, great glove, great arm, great at base running for sixth grade kid, what have you. But my bat was not my strength. But usually I was the one that would end up, or a lot of times I'd end up getting punked It was not fun. But I never got into fights over it. I got my revenge by stealing every base I could. So, with that being said, we'll get off that little entertainment rant. But to wrap that up, sports are about entertainment. At the end of the day, that's really what it's about. Like, I love to see great football. I love to see championship football. But I love to see stars getting a chance to be stars. And to be completely honest, baseball has very few meaningful stars right now. Because all the math and ruthless efficiency, to me, at times, takes away from that. But then again, maybe it's just that baseball's not, or the Major League game is not built to entertain someone like me. Maybe it's just built to entertain accountants. I don't know. I'm not trying to hate on baseball fans. If you got a good argument that's not just ruthless efficiency. Like, I mean, I get the human argument about like protecting his arm and protecting his health so he can achieve whatever long-term career goals he has. But I mean, him having perfect game number 24 in the league's history would have been kind of cool. But there's a bunch of people saying he wasn't going to throw that perfect game anyway. He was done. I mean, okay, but he had a perfect game at that point. If he was really out of gas, I'm like, I'd rather give the guy a shot, at least at the next batter. And I feel like, I think he was only at like 80 pitches. I saw people talking about Johan Santana and him throwing like, it was some ungodly amount of pitches. I can't remember if it was 134 or 150. I think it was 134 pitches when he threw his perfect game his last season with the Mets. And then after that, he just fell off a cliff and he never played in the majors again. And people were blaming that one game. And I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to blame that one game. Because that's what everybody does. I'm like, it's kind of like the Madden curse. It's like the Madden curse didn't get someone. Like Dante Culpepper didn't succumb to a Madden curse. It's like, I don't think Johan Santana's career was ended by one game. Or was ruined because he, because of that one outing. It's just me. But anyway, we're going to get to football. And, well, we're going to get to this draft breakdown real quick. We are on the NFC North, did the AFC North yesterday. Days 1 and 2 were the AFC and NFC East. So, let me flip my hat around. There we go. Sorry, I had to get so close to the screen to read that I had to flip my cap around. So, let's see what we've got here. So we're going to start with the Bears, because obviously we're just going to go order here. So like I've done on the show all week, I'm going to go through team's depth chart and kind of talk about each position group, and I'll talk a little bit about the kind of philosophy. I haven't really gotten to a lot of the philosophy of the teams at times, other than like some minor scheme stuff. But Chicago right now, Ryan Poles, their new GM that they brought in from Kansas City, he's tearing the whole roster down. He's rebuilding this whole sucker from scratch, and I think it's wise. I mean, I would have loved to have gotten James Daniels back on the contract he was on, but I get the idea here. So, the Bears depth chart, and they don't have a first-round pick because of trading up for Justin Fields last year. So, their depth chart's going to be interesting. So their receivers right now, they've got Darryl Mooney down here on the right. He'll be their number one going into the season. They brought in Aquemia St. Brown from Green Bay, who he's got a lot of tools, but he never really broke out in Green Bay. Byron Pringle, who was on the Chiefs last year, there's some people who thought he was a breakout candidate last year. I think he looks like he'll have a chance in an enlarged role here. I think he very much, because they've got him listed as a slot, I think he could very much be their number 2 receiver based on their depth chart right now. They have Isaiah Coulter, who I believe is from Rhode Island. Interesting small school prospect. I'm not sure. I don't really know Simba, or maybe that's just Simba Webster. And then Daz Newsome, who they drafted in the 6th round last year, who I like as a future slot. Some of these slot guys, it takes them a couple years to really break in. Guys who aren't like necessarily elite speed athletes, but kind of are quicker and smarter. They have to get up to speed. And sometimes it also takes getting to click with their quarterback. And Justin Fields is kind of a young quarterback. But I like Newsome. He was a day 3 guy, or a day 3, and kind of a later. I didn't think he'd go before the 5th round. He went 6th round. He was a guy I saw who could be kind of like a Willie Snead, Hunter Renfrow light. I didn't think he'd be as good as Hunter Renfrow, which Renfrow was a guy who I really thought highly of, who went lower than who people were lower on than I expected, but I'm like, this guy just profiles in that Julian Edelman mold. And Renfrow broke out in a big way last year. So but they've got to add to their receiver room. They need a high upside receiver. And Kwame St. Brown is that, but he's been in the league now for 4 years. And he hadn't done it with, a guy who's won the last 2 MVP awards. He had Aaron Rodgers at quarterback. You'd think if he was the guy, and he was there with Devontae Adams, he'd have become something. But we'll see. Because he was really raw coming out. On the offensive line, so last year's 2nd round pick Tevin Jenkins is slated at left tackle. I liked him better at right tackle. He played right tackle all throughout college at Oklahoma State. And I think year 2 he'll be better. And he could turn into a great left tackle. I thought he was a top 20 guy last year. He ended up falling to the middle of the 2nd round, or into the 40s in the 2nd round. So, but if they're willing to run with him as their left tackle, I get it. And I like their new offensive line coach they're bringing in. I'm trying to remember his name. Anyway, they've got Cody Whitehair, who's been there a long time. He can play guard or center. They've got him at guard. They brought in Lucas Patrick from Green Bay to be their center. Dakota Dozier, who they brought over from Minnesota. I don't love that long term. And then last year's 5th round pick, Larry Brown, who started a bunch of games last year at right tackle. He's back at right tackle. We'll see. Those two guys, Brown had a lot of upside. We'll see if he can continue to grow, but he's got to be better than he was last year. Same with Tevin Jenkins. Behind them, I don't love their depth at all. Lachavious Simmons was drafted in the 7th round 2020. He was a fringe guy. I'm not super familiar with Dieter Eisland. Sam Mustipher is, whatever. I didn't think he would have been. I didn't think he was a draftable guy in 2019. He wasn't. At the very least, he's found a way to kind of stick on their practice squad, but there's a reason he's not starting, and they don't trust him to start. They just brought in Willie Wright. They've got Tyrone Wheatley Jr. at right tackle as a backup. they've got to invest in the offensive line. But like I said, they don't have a first-round pick. But they've got to take multiple swings at offensive line in this draft. So I'm going to already spoil it. That's the biggest need. Tight end, I like the tight end position for him. Cole Kmet was solid as a second-round pick in 2020. Ryan Griffin has been a solid contributor at tight end his entire career when he's been healthy. And Jasper Horsted showed some major flashes last year in his third year after being picked up as an undrafted free agent by the Bears in 2019. I like his upside, but I will say this. I like those three guys. They probably ought to draft. Or this tight end class is so deep, they're going to be guys who I think are better than guys who've been drafted in previous years who could go undrafted in this year or this year. And that could be something they target maybe at the tail end. They've got Justin Fields coming back for year, or I say coming back. He's going into year 2. Hopefully he takes a big step up. Hopefully his new offensive coordinator has a better system than Nagy did and does a better job of getting him up to speed this offseason. They brought in Trevor Siemian to be a backup. Siemian said he really liked the plan they had for the team, and that's why he signed on. Nick Foles, they're going to try and get rid of Nick Foles if they can. If they can get some kind of late-round draft assets for him, they'll bite his cap hit in a trade. And then they've got Ryan Willis as a fourth stringer. He's not going to make the final roster. Running back, they've still got David Montgomery. I think Khalil Herbert, 6th-round pick last year, I think he's going to pop in year 2. And he had flashes last year. I really think Herbert's going to make this I think he's going to eat into David Montgomery's carries more and more by the end of the season. And he's really great on third downs. Or I think he can be really great on third downs. They brought in Darrington Evans off waivers from Tennessee, who he just couldn't stay healthy in 2 seasons with us. I get why we cut him. I was worried about his durability coming into the league when we drafted him. I saw the upside, but, I was a little worried about his frame, and that's been evident, or that's turned out, that's kind of come to fruition. And then they brought in Kari Blasingame this offseason, who has been Tennessee's main fullback. He dropped a brutal pass in the Bengals game that broke our backs one offensive possession. And he was just wide open. There's no excuse for it. But he's kind of, and he's a decent blocker, but he's really athletic. But for a guy as athletic as he is, and who isn't necessarily the big thumping kind of fullback, his hands are still kind of iffy. On defense, they've got a little bit of a overhaul coming on defense this year. Because Bilal Nichols is gone. Akeem Hicks at the moment is gone. They let Eddie Goldman go. They've got Travis Gibson, who they drafted in the 5th round in 2020, and Justin Jones, who was a 3rd-round pick in 2018. Along with is that Kairis right or Kairis Tonga? I don't know why I was saying right. Tonga is. See, they've got it. Oh, so they're running a 4-3. Interesting. So they've got Justin Jones and Tonga at the defensive tackle spots. I like Justin Jones a lot. They've got Robert Quinn and Travis Gibson on the outside. I was used to seeing them as a 3-4 from the previous regime, so they're running a 4-3 here. Gibson was a guy that a number of people that follow the draft like I do really liked. I knew some people who had a 3rd round grade on Gibson. I wasn't quite as high on him in 2020, but I get why some other people were higher on him. I feel like they definitely want a little more on the outside, but I think it also said something that he's ahead of Al-Qadin Muhammad, who Chicago brought in from Indy. I know it says Chicago, like unrestricted free agent from Chicago. He was from Indy to Chicago. They have a few errors like that where they've got the current team rather than the previous one. And they brought in Jeremiah Attaochu, who was originally from the Chargers, went to Denver. They actually have some rotational guys to go along with Quinn, but I kind of expected Muhammad to be penciled in as the starter right now because he followed Eberflus from Indy. Depth at defensive tackle. They brought in Mario Edwards Jr. Back in 2020. They re-signed him. Really, he was a street free agent in 2020. I thought he went somewhere else and then just came back. Maybe I'm wrong. And they've got Angelo Blackson, who they brought in from Arizona. He had signed like a 1-year deal with them, I think, after the Titans let him go or let him walk after his rookie contract was up. I believe, yeah. And then they've got Charles Snowden and Sam Kamara as kind of their 3rd string edge guys. And then their 3rd string defensive tackles, Alzoa, who I don't know how to pronounce that name, and LaCale London. This is a team that can justify drafting just about everywhere, I'm going to admit. I have a feeling they'll probably roll with their interior defensive line, but everywhere else could be places they add. Their off-ball linebackers, easily enough. Roquan Smith, really good starter. Or next to him, though, is a undrafted free agent from last year, Caleb Johnson, who I was kind of shocked didn't get drafted last year. And they brought in Joe Thomas, and they still have 2020 undrafted free agent Ladarius Mack. But that's all they've got at middle linebacker. I could see them adding to that position through the draft for sure. In the secondary, they've got Jalen Johnson, Kendall Victor, my gosh, my eyes are really bad right now. I've got this weird, like, rainbow effect in the static in the middle of my vision, and it's just so distracting. I don't know what causes it, because it's not there all the time. So they've got 2020 second-round pick Jalen Johnson going to year 3 as their number 1 corner. He's great. They like Kendall Vilder, as their second corner, 5th-round pick in 2020. They just signed Taven Young, who got cut by the Baltimore Ravens. If he's healthy, he's a really good slot corner. Behind them, they've got last year's 6th-round pick Thomas Graham Jr., who was a day 3 guy that I thought had some pretty good upside at the corner position. I liked his tape a lot. They've got Lamar Jackson, not that Lamar Jackson, obviously. And their backup slot on here is Duke Shelley, who is a 6th-round pick in 2019. And also Bo Pete Keys. That is a great name. That's the cornerback position. I could see them making a move there for sure in the draft. Safety position is pretty good for them. Eddie Jackson, 4th-round pick in 2017, is really good playing as a deep safety. His tackling's 2016 6th-round pick, DeAndre Houston Carson is a guy they developed, and he's been kind of a backup for years, and they have him slotted to take over strong safety. I wouldn't be shocked if free agent Dane Cruikshank, who they just brought in from Tennessee, who I'm going to miss. He also had some durability issues there, but like when he was in Tennessee, awesome special teams player, and he flies all over the place. He can play some slot as well. Like, I love him in that strong safety role. He's better in man coverage than zone. Then they've got another former undrafted free agent, Michael Joseph, who's been a pretty good special teamer for him. Like I said, this team has been... Chicago is in a big rebuild. Like, they have some really nice pieces, like Mooney and Jenkins, Larry Brown. You've got Cody Whitehair, who's been on the team for a while. You've got a young, extremely high upside quarterback in Justin Fields. You've got a nice tight end room. You've got a couple nice running backs on the roster, although you need more running back depth, especially considering I think they're going to be one of the heavier run, or this is the Colts defensive coordinator from the last few years. I feel like they're going to be a fairly run-heavy team. I actually kind of think out of all their position groups, their front seven is, while you would say no star power, there's nice, functional, competent depth here. This is how I'm going to put it for needs. This team is going to hinge on the development of Justin Fields, meaning you need to invest in offensive line and receiver. Period. Those are easily your top two needs. And if we're looking at the second round, I heard EJ on the Bootleg Football podcast, their Q&A live stream, someone asked what, the dream scenario was for their second round picks. And he said George Pickens, Georgia wide receiver, and then trading down, which would probably be moving down in the second round for more, mid-round picks. Which, I get that philosophy because you don't have a first round, so get some more swings. I would say this, depending on who's available at their picks, I like the idea of George Pickens there, a really high upside receiver, and maybe a bigger bodied receiver, which George Pickens fits that bill. Christian Watson fits that bill. This would probably be at the high end of Alec Pierce's value. But, there's another name. I like the idea of those guys. And then with your other pick, offensive line and interior offensive line, you're going to get that rounds 2 through 5. They could probably wait in this draft if they wanted to do something else or move down. And moving down would probably get them in a better range for a developmental tackle prospect. Like, if they wanted to draft Abraham Lucas, I'd be down with that. But they could trade down and maybe still get him at the back end of the second round because it seems like his value, it jumped up, really jumped up, and now it's kind of back down the middle of where he started and where he was, which makes a lot of sense. Kellen Deesh is a guy who they might be able to get the back end, say they trade down towards the end of the second round, or they wait maybe in the third round and pull the trigger. Kellen Deesh as a developmental tackle. On the interior, if you're going to wait till day 3, Luke Fortner of Kentucky. He might not last that long. He's a name that's been rising, and rightfully so. Donovan West have been kind of in the third round mix. I think he's now in the fourth or like day 3. Alec Lindstrom. These are some guys who can play center for you long term. If we're talking guard, Chris Paul out of Tulsa. Cam Jurgens and Cole Stranger guys in that third round range. Although I've seen a lot of buzz that Cole Jurgens might not make it out of the second round because of his athletic traits. Same with Dylan Parham. Parham could fall to the third round too. And I don't mean fall as in like, oh man, I can't believe like but I mean, there's a range, and I think there's a scenario where Parham very much goes to the second round. I think the further you get down in the draft, obviously, those players have wider ranges that they could go in. Because that talent level at the top, these are the guys who have like usually elite production and elite ceiling, or just insanely crazy traits that coaches just are like, we're the guy that's going to get, we can do it. We can get the best out of him. Or we're going to use him to get the most out of his traits where he maybe wasn't in college. So, anyway, so offensive line and receiver easily for Chicago. We're going to move. You need another running back. You need more than 3 running back, or you need 3 healthy running backs, and Darrington Evans is not. All right, at this point, it's basically a given he's going to miss like half the season. So, you need another running back, but you can wait till day 3 for that. Like, it doesn't have to be a big swing. Like, you need another body. You need another swing there. Same with tight end. Those are kind of lesser things on offense. On defense, we're going to look at what I think is the third biggest need for the team. Some people might say safety. I'm going to say linebacker because they only have 4, like, off-ball linebackers on their roster. Maybe you think Charles Snowden or Sam Kamara can take some snaps there, or Adesho or Muhammad. I don't. You need at least 5 solid linebackers on the roster, and for me, I overlooked this position. There are 3 linebackers here. I just skipped one earlier. So I looked at the middle and I looked at the strong. I didn't look at weak side. So they've got Nicholas Morrow, Matthew Adams, who they brought in from Indy, and Noah Dawkins. Still, Joe Thomas is more of a special teamer. Even with this, I still think, and I think the Morrow signing was okay. You still need more at linebacker, and then I'd say safety. So if I'm ranking, let's go 1 to 5. Tier 1, you've got offensive line, receiver for sure. Tier 2, linebacker and safety, or linebacker and just secondary in general, because they've got some guys, but they need more depth. And then running back and tight end kind of after that in tier 3. But they can also just draft the best player available because they're in very much a teardown rebuild. So I don't imagine they're going to reach too much for need in Chicago. But it'll be interesting to see what Ryan Pohl's draft philosophy is, because we kind of know Kansas City, they'll draft best player available, but they'll also kind of reach for need too. It just depends. If they think their roster's good enough, they'll draft a running back at the end of the first round when we don't expect it. So we'll see if Poles has that same draft philosophy. But I have a feeling they're going to trend best player available. Moving on to Detroit, everyone's, there's been a lot of talk about Malik Willis at 2. I'm not convinced of that. I'm not convinced that's happening. But this would be a good team to pull the trigger on Willis because they have Jared Goff there. They have someone where it's like, Willis ain't ready yet. He could sit behind Goff. So I really love their 1-year deal they signed DJ Chark to. If he could stay healthy and play the full season or most of it, I think he can put up some big numbers. even with Goff at quarterback. Goff actually was pretty. I mean, Goff was pretty good last year. I think they have the framework of a really competent offense. Josh Reynolds is a nice secondary perimeter receiver. Tennessee brought him in last year, and then we ended up waiving him because he wasn't great for us. He ended up being a little better for Detroit. I think Reynolds, judging anything on Tennessee's offense last year is hard. Amon-Ra St. Brown, he came out and immediately awesome slot receiver, which shouldn't have been a shock. I like Tyler Vaughn's better than him on tape. I thought Vaughn's was more dynamic, but St. Brown he's got good short area quickness, not necessarily a burner, but he's already translated into a really, really good slot receiver, which bodes well for Detroit. That's a position they don't need to fill now. They can focus on deep threats and more explosive players. They brought in Khalif Raymond, which I think that was last year. Yeah. Who's kind of a special teams return man and kind of go deep with his speed. He doesn't have a lot of size. He's not an amazing receiver. They've got Quintez Cephas, who's not fast at all, but he's kind of long, kind of physical. He's a solid rotational receiver. And beyond that, it's Tom Kennedy, Trinity Benson, and Javon McKinley. You know, these guys are like special teamers, fringe guys. They can do better. I really think they could benefit from drafting a long-term, high upside receiver because Chark's on a 1-year deal. And you may not be willing to pay him. If he has the big breakout season, you may not be willing to pay him the big contract he'll garner because of his tools if he has a healthy, productive season there. Because you may not trust his durability beyond just one season. Their offensive line is definitely the strength of this team. Taylor Decker, still really good left tackle. Jonah Jackson's been good through 2 years at left guard. Frank Ragnow is maybe the meanest run-blocking center in the league. Actually, I'd say it's like between him and Kelsey. Ragnow's great. They still have Halapulavati? Halapulavati. Vitae, who I'll call Vitae from here on out. They brought him in from Philly to be offensive tackle several years ago. He's kind of slid in their starting right guard slot. And, of course, last year's first-round pick, Penei Sewell, is starting at right tackle. He'll probably eventually replace Decker at left tackle, maybe, but they've got a great tackle tandem. The bench, they've got 2020 fourth-round pick Logan Stenberg, who he could take Vitae's starting position, or at least that was the idea when they drafted him. They got Tommy Kramer out of Notre Dame as a undrafted free agent last year. He's backing up at the other guard spot. Evan Brown, another, he was a street free agent in 2020. They've got Dan Skipper, Ragnow's a college teammate at Arkansas, as their backup right tackle. Matt Nelson's the backup left tackle. Skipper's massive. He's like 6'9", 6'8", 6'9". He's huge. Great in the run game. Very much in a power run game. And then they've got Ryan McCollum as their third string guard or center. I could see them drafting offensive line depth, especially at tackle somewhere, but it's not going to be a high priority. At tight end, former top 10 pick, TJ Hawkinson, going into year 4. He's really good. I feel like they're going to announce soon that they're picking up his 5th-year option. Garrett Griffin has just been brought in from New Orleans, or they just brought him in from New Orleans. Campbell's somewhat familiar with him from also coming from New Orleans last year. Brock Wright is their 3rd-string tight end here. And then they brought in Jared Pinkney, Matt Sokol. They have Shane Zylstra, who used to be a receiver and is bulked up. And they have Hunter Bryant, who they picked up as a undrafted free agent in 2020, who's a guy I thought was going to go round 4, round 5. I kind of liked him. So I have a feeling that Pinkney, or these kind of guys, these 4 guys at the back, I have a feeling they could definitely jump up ahead of Griffin and Wright, but we'll see. They've got a lot of tight ends here. I feel like they're not going to draft one because of that. Of course, they have Goff. They brought in Tim Boyle as a restricted free agent from Green Bay going into last year, I believe it was. They re-signed David Blau, and they've also picked up Steven Montez, and he was on their practice squad last year. I'm not convinced the Lions are going to draft a quarterback, and I'm definitely not convinced they're going to draft one at round 2. That would honestly surprise me. At running back, DeAndre Swift is back. Once again, I think he's primed for a breakout. Jamal Williams is a solid 2nd-string running back, or rotational running back. Craig Reynolds is here. I have a feeling Jamar Jefferson is going to jump up this year, especially if anyone in front of him gets hurt. And then Godwin Igwebuike is their 5th-string running back. And then they've got Jason Kabinda at fullback. I think their backfield's fun. I don't see them needing to draft anyone, or at least not high. Defensive line, they brought in Michael Brockers. They drafted Aleem McNeil in the 3rd round last year. Loved that pick. Loved the Levi Onwuzurike pick in the 2nd round last year. Those 2 guys have massive upside. Brockers is a solid veteran, which it's interesting. Brockers is a defensive end, considering they're kind of listed here as a 4-3 team, which they're kind of a hybrid front team. I really feel like Brockers would be more likely, or be just as likely to play nose as McNeil, because McNeil's so athletic at his size. And then at the other starting edge spot, they've got Charles Harris coming back. Their leading sack guy was 7.5 last year. Behind the starters, you've got on the edge Romeo and Julian Okwara brothers. Romeo had I think it was a 10-sack season his first year in 2020. Or 10.5. He had a really productive season, and then wasn't quite as productive last year. Wasn't totally his fault. I think he was a little banged up. They drafted Julian Okwara, his brother, in the 3rd round 2020. They're solid rotational rushers. On the interior there, you've got John Panasini and Bruce Hector. Hector was he was a fringe guy in Tennessee who got on the roster because of injuries, and then when guys got healthy again, he got waived, and Detroit picked him up. Beyond that, they also have Austin Bryant, former, I believe, Clemson defensive end, and very highly recruited. He was a 4th-round pick in 2019. Rashad Berry and Jesse Lemanois. And then your 3rd-string defensive tackles are Jashawn Cornell and Eric Baker. I don't feel like they need to do much on the defensive interior. I think they need to draft an impact edge. And that's what I have them doing at 2 in my mock. Or at least that's what I'm expecting them to do at 2. They need to figure out if somehow Aiden Hutchinson is on the board. And to me, the dream for them, and really I would love to see Aiden Hutchinson stay in Michigan, end up in Detroit. I think that he's a perfect fit for Dan Campbell's scheme, what he wants to do. I think he fits that culture really well. If he's not available at 2, which I still think he's the favorite for the number 1 pick, they've got to make a decision, in my opinion, which I said yesterday, my number 2 edge rusher is Jermaine Johnson. I don't think he's going to be the number 2 drafted. I think Thibodeau and Walker are both going to go ahead of him. And I've heard a lot of buzz that, Dan Campbell's the kind of guy who's not worried about is not worried about Thibodeau's personality. That he believes like they can get the buy-in from guys. Moving on to linebacker, Axel Anzalone and Derek Barnes, their 4th-round pick from last year. I actually like that as a starting linebacker tandem. I really liked Barnes I really liked Barnes last year. They brought back Gerard Davis, who left for a year, went to the Jets, had a solid season. He's now back in town. They've got Sean Dion Hamilton, who they got off waivers from Washington. Josh Woods, Chris Board, and then Devontae Beckett and Anthony Pittman and Curtis Bolton. They've got 9 linebackers on their roster right now. Could they draft one? Yeah, I don't think they need to draft one early. I think they've got a nice or a decent, like they've got a competent linebacker rotation with some upside, especially with Barnes. And Davis seemingly kind of figuring things out. Davis still has some upside as a former first-round pick. And I liked Axel Anzalone coming out. He was really good in New Orleans. Kind of was shocked that New Orleans let him leave. But you can't pay everybody. And Sean Dion Hamilton was like, I can't remember if he played like a hybrid safety linebacker role at Alabama or he started off as safety and ended up moving to linebacker. But I like their linebacker group. On the corner, or at corner, 2019 5th-round pick, Amani. How do you pronounce that? Oruwariye. Okay. It's been a while since I tried to pronounce his name. If I'm not mistaken, he's from Penn State originally. And he was really raw, but he had some great traits. And he's been pretty decent for Detroit. Jerry Jacobs, who was an undrafted free agent last year, is slotted at starting outside corner. And they've got Jeff Okudah in the slot. I'm really hoping. Jeff Okudah, he got hurt and missed all last year. His rookie year was terrible because Matt Patricia just kind of had him doing whatever. It's amazing. Matt Patricia was so shielded by Bill Belichick. Belichick's the great defensive mind in New England. And he's had some other really good ones there, like Romeo Crennel, but Patricia's abilities were overstated. Okudah was looking really good in preseason last year. Like, he was really comfortable in Aaron Glenn's scheme. I think he's going to be good this year. I think he's going to show up this year in a big way. Like, he'll be a starting outside corner rather than a slot. Mike Hughes, who they brought in, former first-round pick out of UCF. He's dealt with injury issues and some other stuff. Miami eventually let him go. Kansas City picked him up. He's got a lot of physical ability. They drafted Afetu Melifonwu in the third round last year. He's long, strong, good, or really good long speed. I think the way the Saints, or should I say, the way Aaron Glenn, their defensive coordinator, wants to play, I think Melifonwu is a great number 2 corner for how they play. I really believe that, and it might be that if Melifonwu, he played safety a bit in college too. Some people thought he'd be a safety. He could end up being kind of like a slot for them as well. Like, he's got some versatility. Let's see, who are their other corners here on the depth chart? Mark Gilbert, Bobby Price, Salvion Smith, who they claimed off waivers from the Niners. That's a guy who I think he still had eligibility with Alabama when he left for the pros. That should have been a red flag to everyone because he was not ready. He didn't think he was going to get to play anymore at Bama, I think, was his worry. Or he was going to get outplayed by other people. He was not ready to come out. And then Juju Hughes. Corner is definitely a position they could still take a swing on. But they have some interesting guys, and they like Jerry Jacobs. He was pretty good as a rookie, considering he was undrafted. At safety, Deshaun Elliott is stepping into, they've signed him to play a starting role. They've got Tracy Walker back. Will Harris is still on the team. Their third-round pick from 2019. Their depth guys, C.J. Moore. They've got Brady Breeze, who they claimed off waivers from Tennessee. I was kind of disappointed ended up kind of letting him go. I was excited we got him in the 7th round when we did, because he's a really nice attacking safety. Jalen Elliott. Oh, Juju Hughes is a safety. The other corner was Parnell Motley. Didn't look far enough up there. But their safety position's fine. They could go with a higher upside safety pick at some point in the draft. But I actually think their safety position's solid. But you're trying to become great. But I'd rather take a big... Oh, and I missed A.J. Parker, who's listed as their backup slot corner. Also an undrafted free agent last year. If we're looking at need, the biggest, most glaring need is a impact pass rusher on defense. And I said that already. That's Detroit's biggest need, and they need to attack at it too. Because it is bigger than quarterback. Yes, most of us don't believe Goff is the long-term answer there. Goff has there was a period of time where we all thought Goff was great. We thought McVay uplifted him, but we thought he was a borderline top 10 guy. I feel like Goff is kind of where Derek Carr was a few years ago. And I wonder if maybe we're undervaluing Goff at this point. But I don't think quarterback is such a crazy need that they need to reach on a quarterback this year when, if Goff really isn't the guy long term, if they nail this year's draft, they can move up and get a better quarterback. Because right now, you've got Bryce Young and you've got C.J. Stroud at the top of next year's quarterback class. Some people have Stroud ahead of Young, which I think is wild, but whatever. Those two guys, if they were in this year's class, would be the top 2 quarterbacks, easily. They'd be the top 2. And we don't know how the rest of the class is going to shake out. Some people were really high on Keaton Slovis. Keaton Slovis could go to Pittsburgh and have a Kenny Pickett season and jump up draft boards again. There's a lot to Keaton Slovis I really like about his game. Sam Hartman at Wake Forest, I really like. But I don't like any of the quarterbacks in this class at 2. Not over the impact pass rushers you can get. Now, the Lions, if they were able to trade down and pick up some more draft capital, that'd be interesting. And you could argue that, well, at 32, you could potentially get an Arnold Ebiketie, a Boye Mafe at 32. And that's absolutely true. But I'd rather have one of, even with my questions about Thibodeau. And heck, David Ojabo, because of his ACL injury, could fall even to 32. I think that would be insane, but I've seen guys with injuries drop or have massive drops. I've seen bullcrap medical red flags that turned out to be bullcrap cause a guy like Montez Sweat, who was a lock to be like picked somewhere between like 4 or 5 and like 10th overall the year he was drafted. What was it? 2019. He dropped all the way into the 20s because of I think it was a heart thing that ended up being, not a thing. So I think you've got to get that impact pass rusher. That's need number one. Obviously, long-term quarterback, because I still have my reservations about Jared Goff, and I wasn't in love with him even during his height with McVay, but he looked like a really good starter. I did think he was elevated. Like, I thought Carson Wentz was better. I'm not sure right now, to be honest. But, so quarterback's there, but if I'm taking quarterback off the table, it's definitely edge rusher, and I'd still say it's right there either way. Edge rusher, I'm saying edge rusher. And really, it's just high upside. Like, who's the best player available? I'd say wide receiver and corner after edge rusher are your next two. And then I'd say probably offensive line depth, particularly like offensive tackle depth. And then it's just kind of best player available at whatever position. Because they could add another linebacker. They could add a higher upside or just another safety to mix there. But I actually think the Detroit Lions now have a competent roster. They just need home run swings on high upside players. Let's see. Moving on to the Packers, who have 2 first-round picks after the Devontae Adams trade. Well, and 2 seconds. Wait, I thought somehow that switched me from Green Bay to Detroit. I love when web pages jump around on you. So great. All right, so Green Bay has brought in Sammy Watkins. That was under the radar. I must have missed that. They've still got Alan Lazard around, and Randall Cobb's still under contract because they signed him to, a 2-year deal, I think, last offseason to be their slot receiver, and he was fine. Like, he was actually pretty good. It was his best year in a couple years. They drafted Amari Rodgers in the 3rd round last year. To play slot as well. He'll eventually take over for Cobb. I really believe he'll break out in year 2, year 3. Because once again, he's a slot type receiver. And he's built like a running back. He's like 5'11", and I want to say he was like 215. He's definitely like 205, 210, 212. Somewhere in there. He's got a running back build. He's not like super fast or anything, but he did run in the low 4.5s, but he's got really good quick acceleration. He's strong. He's strong after the catch. Malik Taylor, Juwan Winfrey, Rico Gafford, Chris Blair. They need receivers, and they need to double, if not triple dip in this draft. And they've done that before. Because I believe back in 2018, it was Marquez Valdez-Scantling, Aquemius St. Brown, and Jake Kumaro. None of those three guys are still with the team. So we'll see if they can nail it. But this is a team that has nailed, especially in the early second round, they've nailed receiver picks in the past. Like, that's where Jordy Nelson, Devontae Adams came from. That's where Randall Cobb was a second-round pick. So I say they spend at least – I want them to spend one of their first-round picks on a receiver and one of their second-round picks on a receiver. But we'll see how the board falls as well, because there's a bunch of ways they can go. But they've got to replace Devontae Adams, and this is a draft. I mean, they've got to target that position. They got to take multiple bites at the apple. On the offensive line, you got David Bakhtiari, fully healthy, back to being their starting left tackle. Josh Myers stepped in and was a solid starting center, even though I thought he was a little drafted ahead of guys I thought were better, including Creed Humphrey, who I'm still kind of dumbfounded there. They drafted John Runyon in the 6th round of 2020, son of former Titans and Eagles, I believe Pro Bowl tackle, John Runyon, really good player. Their starting right guard is Royce Newman, who they drafted in the 4th round last year. And Elton Jenkins, they are rolling with him at right tackle. He's played all over the line. He started off as a guard, but he's played tackle. He played left tackle competently. Like, this guy's really good. I loved him. I had a first-round grade on him. I didn't think he was going to go first round, but I had a first-round grade on him in 2019 coming out of Mississippi State. Jenkins is great. Beyond that, though, you can see they don't have a whole lot of depth. They've got 26th-round pick Jake Hansen as their backup center. They've got Josh Nillman, who I don't know who that is. He was apparently an undrafted free agent in 2019. Colvin Larson was a 6th-round pick last year. He's their backup right tackle. And they've got Michael Manet, who I believe he was a Penn State center at Penn State. They got him off the street last season. They need to throw draft picks at the offensive line for sure, because they've lost a bunch of stars, but they do a really good job of developing day 2 and day 3 guys. Look at these, or where these guys were drafted. Bakhtiari was a 4th rounder in 2013. If you could see some of the guys who aren't there anymore, like Lucas Patrick, I believe he was a day 3 pick. John Runyon, 6th-round pick. Myers was a 2nd-round pick. Jenkins was a 2nd-round pick. Newman's a 4th-round pick. They love, throwing day 3 picks at offensive linemen and taking their time developing them. They're going to take a few this year. Tight end Robert Tonyan is back and he's healthy. Mercedes Lewis is still playing. Like, my goodness. I don't know if he's ever going to retire. They still have 23rd-round pick Josiah DeGuerra. I believe he was from Cincinnati. Former receiver, bulked up to the tight end Tyler Davis. I believe he was a Cal product, but I might be wrong there. I might be thinking of another Tyler Davis. And then, who are these guys? Dominique Daphne and Elise Mack. Kind of depth options. I could see them going back to the tight end. Well, this is such a good tight end draft. Like, if you've got guys you like and who are competent, who've been in your system, wait until like round 6, 7. They're going to be guys who are going to end up being long-term tight end 2s that you're going to be able, like, and good ones that you likely will be able to get in the 6th and 7th round. There are guys that other years would probably be drafted or drafted in the 4th, 5th round because of the dearth of talent at tight end are going to go undrafted this year. Of course, Aaron Rodgers is back. They've got Jordan Love as his backup. Kurt Binkett behind that, and they brought in Danny Etling, former LSU quarterback who spent some time in New England. Well, he was drafted by New England. I think it was like a 7th round pick. So their quarterback situation's great. Aaron Jones still starting. A.J. Dillon as his backfield mate. Like, that is a great tandem. Kylan Hill going into his 2nd year. I think Hill will end up carving out a little bit of a role as a receiver at some point this year. I think he's eventually going to replace Aaron Jones. I don't think Aaron Jones is going to survive this the full length of this contract, especially if he doesn't bounce back from a down year this past year. And then they've got Patrick Taylor behind that. This is a team that could draft another, day 3 running back. And then DeGara also is their starting fullback. Defensively, they need defensive line depth. They've got a really nice front 3 in Dean Lowry, Kenny Clark, and Jaron Reed. They drafted Tadarius Slayton in the 5th round last year as a nose player. And then they have an undrafted free agent from last year, Jack Heflin, who I didn't even evaluate him last year. Well, I only got to like 150 something evaluations last year. So, I mean, that's like maybe getting into the 5th round of players. For which, I had guys that I evaluated didn't get drafted, so. Which, I mean, those are full of evals. I watched tape of more guys than that. But, like, I'm almost 100 players ahead of where I was at the draft last year. And we've still got 2 weeks to go. So, anyway, they need defensive line, but once again, it's more depth and developmental guys. They can get that, rounds 3 through 7. On the edge, Rashawn Gary is going into year 4. He's going to get his 5th-year option picked up. Going to guarantee that. He looked great last year. They extended Preston Smith. They let Zadarius Smith go. Behind those two guys, though, depth is kind of You've got 7th-round pick Jonathan Garvin, who there's some traits of him that I liked. Thought he'd go before the 7th round, but, they've got Tipa Galei, who was a find of theirs undrafted. I had not heard of the guy until I saw him as one of their undrafted pickups in 2020. Randy Ramsey and Ladarius Hamilton, who they picked up off Tampa Bay's practice squad. They need to draft edge. That's another thing I could see them even drafting in the 1st round. With the 28th pick, or even the 22nd if they like they got enough. I think Boye Mafe would be an awesome fit in Green Bay because there's a lot about his profile that reminds me of Rashawn Gary. He's not quite as big as Gary, but he is really thick built. His athleticism, traits, and ability outstripped his production in college, but that happens to some players at the college level. And I think he would be, and a lot of that can also depend on scheme and things of that nature. I think Mafe would be an awesome fit here. Further down the board, Sam Williams, who's really sky-high athletic potential. I've been mentioning him a lot. I do need to to say that back in 2020 he was charged with sexual battery, and that's a pretty heavy thing. Those charges were dropped. They were not pursued, but teams do need to look into that because, once again, if there's enough evidence to where you believe something happened, and you don't think he's really remorseful or moved on from that, that's a huge risk to investment in a player. And I think that's one of the reasons Sam Williams has not been talked about more in the process, is because of that. But if he's clean, and I mean, there's been nothing since that incident over the last 2 years, or year and a half, or whatever, you might be willing to take that risk. A guy who would give them something different at the position from Gary and Smith would be like a Nick Bonito. A Nick Bonito who's just pure speed and electricity, but he's really raw and he doesn't really have a plan. He just goes. He'd be an interesting kind of change of pace guy for them who you could get on day 2. Trying to think of a couple of these other guys. Drake Jackson at USC would also just be kind of like a solid pick. Moving on to the secondary, Eric Stokes was one of people's reaches of the first round last year. Actually turned out he was awesome in their scheme. He was perfect to play outside corner for them. They've got Jair Alexander back. Rasul Douglas has played really well in Green Bay. They re-signed him. They're probably going to play a lot of Jair Alexander now in the slot and roving and being a menace with his amazing change of direction, acceleration, instincts, awareness, and ball skills. Behind that, they have Shamar Jean-Charles, who I thought was a solid swing in the 5th round last year. He fits the profile of, like, just kind of click on him and show. Out of Appalachian State, 5'11", 182. He's not like, this says 5110. Whatever. So 5'11", 182. I wish it showed his arm length. He's like an average length corner. I think I'm confusing him with someone else, but anyway, they don't like drafting corners under 5'11" or really under 6 foot too often. I mean, Jair Alexander was kind of interesting. Like, some people were like kind of surprised that they took him or took Jair Alexander, but Alexander's just awesome. But John Charles is one of the best FCS players that I watched on tape from the 2021 draft. I thought that was a pretty good move by them. Keandre Thomas and Kasim Nixon and Ladarius Hamilton are their other. Oh, no. Hamilton was a linebacker. My bad. I looked up too long. Let's see. It was John Charles, Thomas, Nixon, and Kabian Into are their corners behind their starters. They need to draft a corner, in my opinion, because, well, you need to draft a corner in every draft. If you've got enough picks, you probably should just be adding to that competition because you need a bunch of good corners. solid corners. Safety's really solid for them. They've got Darnell Savage. They've got Adrian Amos. That's a really great safety pairing. Vernon Scott, they drafted in the 7th round in 2020. They've got Sean Davis, who they picked up as a street free agent in 2021. Different Sean Davis than the one I was talking about yesterday when I was talking about the Steelers. He's kind of a solid special teamer, or back-end safety, and Ennis Gaines. If we're looking at the Packers, let's see. I really do think that I think receivers big. This is a big draft. One of the reasons they traded Devontae Adams is you look at this depth chart right here and you look at how thin they are on the offensive line. You look at the receiver room, and yeah, Watkins is a name, but he's not been extremely healthy. Like, he flashes, but he's not been consistent for several years now. They need to build out. They need a high upside talent at receiver. And they need multiple swings at getting it. They need offensive line depth. Obviously, trading Adams created a bigger need at receiver, but you look at the lack of depth. They've only got 5 guys on their depth chart that play defensive line. Beyond their starting 2 edge rushers, the other 4 guys are pretty nondescript. Other than I think Garvin went a little later than I expected, and I thought he had pretty high upside for a 7th round draft pick. You know, their middle linebacker situation, which I didn't talk about, I skipped it. They re-signed Devondre Campbell to a big contract, but their starter next to him is Chris Barnes, who was an undrafted free agent in 2020. Ty Summers is behind him, 7th round pick in 2019. Isaiah McDuffie was a 6th round pick last year. Ray Wilson is just, street free agent guy. He's never really done anything. Middle linebacker is a position they need to address. But they needed more picks to do that and do so in a meaningful way. And they're saving money long term. And the thing is, Devontae Adams had the same offer on the table from the Packers. But he told them that he wanted to play in Oakland. Or not Oakland, but for the Raiders. He wanted to play for the Raiders. He grew up a Raiders fan. And he was college teammates with Derek Carr. He wanted to play with Derek Carr again. So, getting 1st and 2nd round picks for Adams was huge. You're saving long-term money, and you're able to restock for the future with cheaper guys who have the ability to outperform their contracts. So I'm talking about receiver, and I'd say offensive line depth is a massive need, but I wouldn't put it on the tier of. Well, I think wide receiver is easily their tier 1 need. Like, this stands out above everything else. From there, they need offensive line depth and people who can challenge and compete with Runyon and Newman for the guard spots. I think they need to take multiple swings at guards and tackles in this draft. They need to take multiple swings at wide receiver. They need to work on they need to get a high upside pass rusher out of those first 4 picks. Defensive line depth as well. And they need to take a shot in the secondary. I would say if their first 4 picks if they don't come away with at least 1 receiver, 1 offensive lineman, and 1 pass rusher out of those first 4 picks, I think people are going to be a little disappointed. But it might depend on how the board falls, because, once again, for what I'm talking about, there's a lot of depth in interior line rounds 3 through 5. But there are some guys that I think will be available at 22 and 28 at offensive line that would be worth those picks. Zion Johnson and Kenyon Green are worth picking. And if you believe in Tyler Smith's upside, you might believe he's worth it at 28. I think he's a second-round pick, personally. And maybe he would be available with those. But I've been hearing a lot of buzz. People really like his potential. He could go in that back. I think he could go in the back 8 picks of the first round. Potentially. Ooh, that really threw me down the page. And then we'll close with Minnesota, and then I'm getting out of here. We're going to fly through this one. So, for Minnesota, and they're picking at 14, you've got Justin Jefferson, you got Adam Thielen, KJ Osborne. Your top 3 receivers, you're liking it. Osborne in year 2 look like a solid third receiver. They like B.C. Johnson. I think Amir Smith-Marsette's going to get a little more of a chance in year 2. The thing is, with their scheme, they don't run as deep or as many receivers as some other teams. But I think Amir Smith-Marsette could force his way into some snaps in the slot and doing some little gadget things because of his skill set and his agility and his ability with the ball in his hands. I really like him. And Thielen at this point, he's on the wrong side of 30. At some point, he's going to start to decline. But he might just turn into an awesome slot guy. And extend his career that way. So we'll see. I like Blake Prohl. He's a higher upside guy than people give credit. I was kind of shocked he went undrafted in last year. I thought someone would draft him, in the back 100 of the draft, like the last 100 picks. I was wrong, but the Vikings got a hold of him. Tristan Jackson, not super familiar with him. Can't say, and nor Myron Mitchell, who they picked up as an undrafted last year. And I don't know, and honestly, Dan Chisena, don't know him either. Let's see. Moving on to the offensive line, Christian Darrisaw, who they drafted in the first round last year, is slated to start at left tackle. I think he'll be up to speed this year. I thought I had a top, I thought he was going to go in the top 15, to be completely honest, last year. And he ended up falling to 23. But he's good. The fact that the Vikings were able to trade down and get Darrisaw, because I had them drafting Darrisaw at the original slot they had last year, which I believe was 14, 14. They're at 12 this year, not 14. Sorry, the Ravens were at 14 this year. I think Darrisaw is really good. Ezra Cleveland starting at left guard. I was a huge fan of him in 2020. Garrett Bradbury is their starting center. The problem with Bradbury is he gets bullied by really strong guys, in pass protection. He can get just thrown by some of the stronger, more explosive interior rushers. That I worry about for him. Jesse Davis, who got cut by Miami, is penciled in to start at right guard. Don't love that for the team. And then Brian O'Neill is their right tackle, and he's really good. And a testament to their ability to develop players who need a little bit of time and physical development. Backing them up, 2026 round pick Blake Brandel is there. Brandel's got an interesting story. Chris Reed, backup guard. Austin Solotman. That's a name. Wyatt Davis, who they drafted in the third round last year, who I thought was a day 3 guy. I wasn't shocked he went third round, but I didn't think he was as good as some other people did or do, especially not in pass pro. They're really going to be hoping that that Wyatt Davis beats out Jesse Davis. And then Timon Paris is their backup right tackle right now. And they've got a couple of backup interior guys. Ali Udo, who hasn't really caught or really gotten a lot of footing after being drafted in the 6th round 2019. And 2020 7th round pick Kyle Hinton. I think they could use a swing at guard at some point in the draft. Or tackle. Like, they definitely need more competition for their swing spots, their backup spots. Tight end, you got Irv Smith, who he was primed for a breakout last year if he didn't get hurt. Instead, his backup, Tyler Conklin, kind of broke out. Got a free agent deal from the Jets. They brought in Johnny Munt. They've got Ben Ellefson there. And one of my favorite day 3 picks of last year, Zach Davidson, who was a 5th-round pick last year. I think he's got a lot of receiving upside. The dude's 6'7", 245. He's really long. He's got pretty decent long speed. When he's got a little bit of a runway. Super high upside guy out of Central Arkansas. I really hope he gets a chance. But tight end's one of those positions. It can take you a couple years of development. Like, some of those guys don't pop until year 3, even year 4. Kirk Cousins is still there at quarterback. He said he wants to retire with the team. I hope that happens. I think Kirk Cousins, Derek Carr is kind of in that same Derek Carr range. It's like, seriously, like, I'm playing great ball. I put up really good numbers. You know, I'm doing the best I can sometimes on teams that aren't as good as y'all think they are. Or aren't as well coached as these teams that are doing better than us. Sean Mannion's been there for a few years, they really only picked him up last year. I thought they picked him up in 2020, but Sean Mannion's back as backup. They drafted Kellen Mond last year in the 3rd round. I think he beats out Mannion this year for that top backup spot. And then Nate Stanley was a 7th-round pick in 2020. He's been on their practice squad. He just lacks arm talent. Dalvin Cook is their starting running back still. Alexander Madison's a great second-string back. A lot of people were shocked this guy went in the 4th round because a lot of people had not heard of him. But Kene Nwangwu, he is a explosive, powerful running back. He's got a lot of upside, but he was still pretty raw when he came out. The bootleg guys were talking about him last year, and I want to say I heard Bucky Brooks talk about him too, and they really liked his long-term upside. He's probably going to end up replacing Madison as Cook's long-term backup when Madison comes up for a contract, free agent contract at the end of the year. And then A.J. Rose is their 4th-string back. He was an undrafted free agent last year. C.J. Ham has been their fullback since they got him undrafted in 2016. Defense, they brought in Harrison Phillips from Buffalo on one of my favorite free agent contracts of the offseason. They brought in Dalvin Tomlinson last year to play nose. Armon Watts was a 6th-round pick in 2019. They developed. He's a solid interior, role player. Behind there, Jalen Twyman, who they drafted in the 6th round last year, who I thought there were reasons he slid, but I thought he was a 3rd, 4th round level player. He was in my top 120 last year. James Lynch, who was a 4th-round pick in 2020 out of Baylor. Really like him, too. Jordan Scott, undrafted player from last year. TJ Smith, Ty McGill, and Julian Taylor are their 3rd stringers. Uh, they could absolutely go after interior line, but I kind of think they're fairly solid. They should, with some of the young guys they've got for depth here, like McGill and Twyman and Lynch and Scott, they should give them they should give them the shot at, you know, either beating out guys ahead of them or at least solidifying these rotation spots. I don't think they have to focus on those positions. And they're switching to a 3-4. They brought in Zadarius Smith after he was a cap casualty from Green Bay. It was thought for a minute he was going to go back to Baltimore, but that didn't happen. So he's right now going to line up across from Danielle Hunter, and that's great for this year. They've got DJ Wonham, who is one of the best, situational rotation pass rushers. He's really efficient as a, rotational guy. They drafted Kenny Willix in the 7th round 2020. I really like his work ethic, and he's more. Some people thought he wasn't that athletic, and then he turned out to be pretty athletic. He's got some freakiness to his ability, or he's got some freakiness that it's hard to explain. I'm trying to remember the video, but he put out this workout video, and it was like, this dude's doing what? And then they also have 2021 third-round pick Patrick Jones II, who I really like. They have a 4th-round pick from last year, Janarius Robinson, who was not one of the guys I got a complete eval on because I had not gotten to him yet. They have some depth here. They could draft an impact guy, but I personally think you've got some guys with ability like Patrick Jones, Janarius Robinson, Kenny Willix, and DJ Wonham, who you should just continue to develop. Continue developing these guys to see if they can become that guy. And, of course, at some point, there's been talks about potentially trading Danielle Hunter. I'm not convinced that's going to happen. In the middle, they signed Jordan Hicks, who was a cap casualty of Atlanta. They still have Eric Kendricks. That's a great starting linebacker pair. They drafted Troy Dye in the 4th round in 2020. Blake Lynch is an undrafted free agent who's been playing special teams for them that they like. They drafted Chaz Surratt in the 3rd round last year. And if you're wondering how they had so many 3rd and 4th round picks last year, that was because of the trade down with the New York Jets that they did. That allowed the Jets to move up and get Elijah Vera Tucker. I like Chaz Surratt. Some people were Marcus Whitman. I keep wanting to say Matt, but it's Marcus. Marcus Whitman, that franchise guy. He was kind of low on Chaz Surratt. I like him. This guy was a high school quarterback. And actually, I think when he went to UNC, he went originally as a quarterback. But he's not the fastest linebacker, but he's not slow. And I really like his IQ at the position. I think he's eventually going to develop into something good. I like their linebacker room. And they also have Ryan Conley, who's a solid depth linebacker, and Tuff Borland, who they got as an undrafted free agent last year. I think they're good at linebacker. I know Kendricks is up there, or is, kind of getting up there in age. People say he's starting to kind of show signs of slowing down a little. Jordan Hicks has been in the league for a while, but he's a really good veteran. They've got some developmental guys. They could draft a linebacker, but I'd say keep developing and try and get Troy Dye, Chaz Surratt there. That's not like a high priority position to me. In the secondary, they re-signed Patrick Patterson, who they picked up last year, 3rd round pick in 2020, Cameron Dantzler. has looked really good. They brought in Chandon Sullivan from Green Bay. He's going to battle it out for slot snaps. They brought in Nate Hairston from Denver. They've got Chris Boyd, who's been around for a bit, 7th-round pick in 2019. Perry Nickerson, who they signed away from the Green Bay Packers as restricted free agent, I think last year. He'll be battling with Sullivan for slot duties, just like they did in Green Bay. And then they also have Harrison Hand, who was a 5th-round pick in 2020. Corner is, I think, the position they go at 12. I've had Trent McDuffie to them for a while. It's possible that Stingley could drop there, but I think after his pro day, I don't think that's going to happen now. But it's still possible. And I forgot about Ty Smith, who they brought in from Tennessee, who's a solid kind of outside, take a few snaps, play special teams kind of guy. Safety, they still have Harrison Smith. They really like Cameron Bynum, who they drafted in the 4th round last year. They want him to take over that other safety role. Josh Metellus, who they drafted in the 6th round of 2020. They like as a depth guy. They've got Miles Dorn there, who was an undrafted free agent in 2020, but they could use another safety to battle Metellus and Miles and as well Bynum. So if I'm looking at Minnesota's roster right now, your biggest need, like I said, is corner. Very much is corner. There's been talk about them going impact edge rusher. That's something they could do. I actually think they've got a solid roster. Once again, I still think corner's the big need. Safety, because Harrison Smith, he's on the wrong side of 30. I mean, he's well into his 30s now. Because he was drafted, 1st round in 2012? He's going into his 12th season in the league this year. Or no. He's going to his 11th season in the league this year. So, they need to start looking for a guy who can replace him as well. But I'm going to say corner. And then everything else is mostly depth, which is great. That's great news for a team. I would also say interior offensive line, someone who can push kind of their guys who aren't Cleveland and Bradbury, or even push them too, but they need competition on the interior for sure, in my opinion. They need tackle depth, but for the most part, it's depth and taking home run swings, I think, with picks is what they need to do all over the roster. Because, I mean, Kendricks, Hicks, Zadarius Smith, Harrison Smith, those guys, Adam Thielen, those guys are going to have to be replaced inside of the next 2 to 5 years. Or I would say maybe probably 2 to 3 years. Some of them maybe even next year. So you probably ought to invest in the linebacker position and and pass rushers this draft. Although you do have a lot of young pass rushers to develop that you already have. So I'd love to see Stingley fall to Minnesota at 12, because that would give them potential at getting a younger version of Patrick Peterson, like the Patrick Peterson that played in Arizona. But I'm thinking Trent McDuffie's more likely. If they don't go with McDuffie at 12, if Jermaine Johnson's there at 12, or somehow even Kayvon Thibodeau, that'd be interesting. Kyle Hamilton might be a name at 12 if he's available, and I could see him being there. he could learn from Harrison Smith. But Minnesota's a team I could very well see trading down. I could actually see any of the teams from, and including the Jets at 10, I could see any of the teams from 10 to 14 trading down with the Saints or the Steelers for them to move up for a quarterback. I don't think it's likely the Saints are going to move up for a quarterback. I do think the Steelers are, especially if Willis gets into their range, which I think is going to happen. I don't think Willis is going to go top 10, and I think that's going to mean that, the Steelers trade up for him. I really think that's going to happen. But we'll see in a couple weeks. With that being said, that's the show for the night. I'm going to get off of here and get some sleep. I'll catch you guys later. Y'all have a great... let me flip it to the big cam for a second. Y'all have a great Friday, I guess, because, we're almost a Friday right now. It's 11:30. Y'all have a great evening. Get some sleep. If you're watching this later, have a great rest of your day. I will catch y'all tomorrow with some NBA talk. So...